Hey guys, welcome back to the City Rev Life podcast. My name is Mandy, and with me I have the lovely Rebecca Barnes. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Doing good. I'm better. I'm so good because you're here with me, Rebecca.
Oh, well, thank you. It's nice to see another human being.
I know.
Outside of my house.
And it also feels nice because I feel like we're just two friends chatting.
It is nice. It's very, very nice to see you.
It feels good. Yeah. Before we dive into today's topic, I just wanted to remind you, if you could please subscribe to our channel, the City Rev Life podcast. This helps you. Every time that we upload a new episode, you're the first person to know about it. So on that note, let's get started.
Let's do it. I'm excited.
Let's do it. Today we're going to be talking about foster care. And we're going to be specifically talking about some challenges and opportunities that come with foster care. And we actually have the perfect person to be able to speak into this, Rebecca. She's worked with 4Kids South Florida, which is a foster care agency here in South Florida, for 5.5 years. She's done a lot of work with foster kids and their families. And it's especially an honor because here at City Rev Church, we've actually had such a heart for foster care, and we've had a lot of experience with 4Kids South Florida. So would you be able to tell us a little bit about that agency and what your role was?
So I worked there several years ago. Ended up stepping down a little bit ago when we started our family. But while I was there, they became one of the lead agencies in Broward County for recruiting, training, and licensing foster parents. And so my job was to work with the foster parent after they were licensed and help them navigate through the system of having a foster child placed in their home and all that comes with that. The emotional side of it, as well as just the logistical side of it, and the journey that the foster care system is, all the ups and downs. And so it was just a privilege for me, Mandy, because I got a chance to have a front row seat to see really some of my heroes in action. They are on the front lines of ministry. They are walking with these children, a child, through the day in, day out stuff, not knowing what they're going to get. And it was a joy and a privilege, as well as certainly a challenge. But overall, it just forged such beauty and such a joy to see those families impacted and children to be restored.
Oh, that sounds like such an amazing opportunity.
It was.
I love that.
It was very sweet time.
So when a person or a family is considering entering into foster care or being a foster parent, I know that you have so much insight as to maybe some potential challenges that they might have, but also not just challenges, but opportunities that can arise from that. So would you be able to kind of like lead us in, tell us a little bit about some challenges and opportunities that you've saw and had experience with?
Absolutely. So first of all, when a child comes into foster care, it's due to either abandonment or abuse or neglect. And the circumstances are such that it is not safe for them to be in their current living situation with their current caregivers. And so we call affectionately these children as children that come from hard places. Hard places meaning that they have experienced a relationship-based trauma. Now in trauma, we use that term a lot with veterans or when we experience maybe a natural disaster. We talk about traumas, and we've got research to help us understand and equip us to deal with people who are struggling with those types of traumas. But this is a relationship-based trauma. Not to minimize that at all, but this is a child who should have received protection, safety, love from a caregiver who, for whatever reason, was not able to provide that. And so the relationship was severed. Trust was not built. And with foster care, they, as a result, had to be removed from their home. And so they come from hard places because they did not get the foundation that they needed as a child to thrive. So they have fewer tools in their tool belt, and that's when we start to see some of the emotions and some of the behaviors that maybe is associated with kids that are typically quote unquote in the system because they're coming from hard places. So one of the challenges I think that we interact with, if we don't understand that, is our expectations as parents, as adults. If you sign up to become a foster parent, is what are our expectations for impacting their lives looks like, changing their world. I think sometimes the ideals take over and we're saying, we're going to do this, we're going to change the world for that child. Whoever comes to our house is going to leave completely different, and they will leave completely different. There's no way that change won't happen, but managing our expectations for that change and what that change looks like, I think, is one of the initial challenges. Because I think whether we agree or realize or not, we all come in with a set of expectations without knowing.
Yeah.
And then when a situation happens or arises and it's not going well or not going where we think it should go,
yeah.
it kind of halts us, and we're like, oh, this is harder than I thought it was going to be or it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So,
or you can even doubt whether this was the right thing for you.
Absolutely.
You know, whenever you're met with a challenge, you're like, well, maybe this was the wrong choice for our family.
Yeah.
You know, and I love hearing that, because challenges don't always mean that it was a wrong decision.
Absolutely.
Or it was a mistake for you. Right. You know, challenges could mean that God is just trying to grow you and stretch you in this, and them too. You know?
It's so true. And it's, I think, a realistic expectation is there will be opposition.
Yes.
And because we serve a God who redeems all things, he will turn it and use it for good. You may not always see what that looks like, or it's not going to yield the picture that you have in your mind. So while you may be providing that warm meal, that safe environment, a lock on their door, you may not get a thank you for that, or just a kind word or meeting an expectation. You might instead get anger or a attitude or defiance. And so it's like, that's not what I thought. I thought I provide an act of love, an act of service, and it's met with opposition. It's met with resentment. And so a lot of times with our kids, to acknowledge that you are providing a place of safety, a place of love, stability, food, shelter, sometimes adds like salt to the wound that their caregiver, their birth family could not do that for them. And so it makes them, that dissonance of you can provide this, my family can't, produces anger.
Yeah.
And so when foster kids act out in anger towards your acts of love, I actually tell foster parents that's actually one of the greatest compliments that they could give you, because it's now showing I feel safe enough to let what's really going on come to the surface. Because when I was at home, I had to keep it all together. I had to fight for myself, fend for myself. I didn't know where my next meal was coming from. I wasn't in a place to be able to let my guard down and let those emotions come to the surface. And so it's a very weird way to view it as a compliment. But I do tell our families, expect that, because that's the child's way of saying, okay, I feel safe enough to let you know I'm angry right now, and I don't necessarily know all the reasons why. Yeah,
that's really good. It sounds like if that kind of getting some pushback and getting some anger and maybe even getting some attitude back, it sounds like a backwards form of hope,
That's a good way to put it.
And in the way that it's like, well, if you're getting that, then you know that a wall is down, and you know that now there's opportunity for growth and there's opportunity for healing.
Yes.
If you approach that with wisdom and love.
Yes.
And I love that. I love this conversation, because it's helping us to see that just because you're getting these and setting realistic expectations, just because you're getting these reactions maybe from your foster child, that it doesn't mean that we're pulling the stop on this.
Right.
It means that this is a good sign.
It's working.
Yeah, it means that it's working.
Yep. You're
so hopeful.
Getting what you're getting, and you're getting what you signed up for.
Yeah.
So it's a paradigm shift. Instead of seeing it as, I signed up to be able to change their world, you will, but ultimately God is their Savior. You can't save them, but you do point them to their Savior. And in the process, your world gets transformed, and you interact with the gospel, and that child brings things to the surface in you that otherwise may not, but it becomes a sanctification process that ultimately the Lord does a good work in and through us. Yeah. So it's a backwards, like you're saying, a backwards compliment or a backwards counterintuitive way of thinking about hope.
Yeah, but it also, it stretches you.
Yes.
I think as a person, as a family, and as a believer in Jesus, if you're a believer in Jesus, that could stretch your faith as well. So
Absolutely.
would you be able to speak a little bit into that?
As a parent especially, I think if you've raised your own children especially, I think you encounter this, because if you get into foster care and maybe you have a couple or 3 children that are a little bit older, maybe middle school, high school, maybe college, or somewhere out the door, there's an easy way to think, hey, I've done this before. I can do this again. I've got this. And you know, this worked with my kids, and it's worked with me, and I think it should work again. And one of the biggest differences is that kids that come from these hard places need different things. And so when employing some of the same strategies of discipline or structure and it's not received, I think it can be frustrating, and rightfully so. It is frustrating. But the opportunity is to then bend your parenting style or bend your strategies to meet the needs of the child, and not to expect them to cater to the culture of your family and how you've done things. So if timeout was a strategy that you use with your children, and you even have age-appropriate children that would respond well to that particular strategy, we find with foster children, timeout is not good because it triggers a sense of abandonment and neglect. And so we do time in. We draw that child closer to us. When they're doing the behaviors that tend to push you away and make you want to get space from your child, that's actually the time that you need to bring them closer. And so maybe they're not strong enough in a moment to be off playing with other kids. Maybe they just need to be with you for a little bit.
Yeah.
And that gets them stronger. It makes them feel close, but it's counterintuitive because that's maybe not something you do with your own children. Another classic example is with food. So there might be a common house rule in your home about, hey, there's no food in the bedrooms. We just keep food in the kitchen. We don't want bugs. A lot of times things can happen, you forget, and it stays there longer than you think, and we run into problems. So just house rule, no food in our bedrooms. And that works great, but then now you have a foster child who food represents something completely different. Food represents a sense of safety, a sense of security, a sense of control, because maybe they didn't know where their next meal was coming from or when it was coming. And so when they get food, it comes across like hoarding it or hiding it because they had to do that in their previous living situation.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would be gone. And so if you're a foster parent, you walk in, you find little wrappers under the bedroom, the bed or under the pillow, and you're frustrated, like, we've said this over and over, no food in the bedroom. Well, you can discipline that or see it as a need is not being met, a sense of safety. And so one idea that I heard that I thought was really well done was let the child hold like a closed granola bar in their pocket. They can just hold it, and they're allowed to have that one thing. So during school or during family time, or if they're allowed to have that thing by their bed in their room, it's just knowing that when you're ready to eat it, if you really need to eat it, come into the kitchen. And that helped disarm the fear, but also help them still meet a level of expectations that's in your home. And you're maybe not going to do that with every child, but that's what that child needed in that moment. So that's how you kind of cater your expectations, your strategies to meet the needs of the child.
That's good. That's actually reminding me, before I came on staff here at City Rev Church, I was a teacher in Miami. And where I was teaching there, it's different from foster care. I wasn't a foster parent, but it was similar in the way that a lot of my students were coming from, like you're saying, hard places. They're coming from really hard homes. They're coming from abandonment and neglect. And a lot of these kids, they didn't even have their parents in their life,
Yeah.
And so I noticed as a teacher in my classroom, I had to be true to my role as a teacher and the person that has the authority in the classroom. But I also had to be intuitive to what that certain kid is needing, even if that means that I had to bend my rule a little bit in order to include them, in order for them to feel safe, to feel included, and to feel loved by me, and to be able to create that trust between me and them.
That's good.
And so I'm not saying, hey, it's okay, don't don't follow my rules. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, hey, maybe we can meet in the middle here and figure out a way that would feel safe and feel okay for you, while also keeping the rule of the house and learning discipline, because that's really good for kids too.
Yes.
So I love that point, Rebecca. That's good.
Well, and it's so applicable for teachers and your experience as a teacher. You see that. I'm sure you've seen episodes of that in the context of school, and school becomes a huge place of safety for children, especially who maybe experience home lives that are characterized with violence or status offenses and misdemeanors and things like that. So it's those are also our unsung heroes with the teachers, because they do the same thing. So
I agree.
So valuable.
Yes, I agree. As I'm hearing you talk, I think too, there's so much about this as far as like growing and really leaning on God and learning to use wisdom in the way that you react in your home. It just reminds me so much of the work in ministry.
Yes.
And so it feels like foster care is a ministry.
It is.
So would you be able to speak a little bit into that?
Yeah, you nailed it. Absolutely. It is a ministry. I mean, it's opening up your home and your heart to meet purely the needs of someone else. And not that you don't get something in return, because whenever we love God and we love others, as Christ loved us, there is a return on our investment. And it's a beautiful thing. But I think if we're not careful, it can catch us off guard, or it can become an ultimate thing. Sometimes I hear things about people who get into this and they're so passionate about families, which is usually the best springboard into getting into foster care. They're passionate about their family, they're passionate about God's family, and they just love to see families healthy and heal. And if they can be a part of that in someone else's life, that can be so redemptive. And so while that's a beautiful thing, it can't be an ultimate thing. So for example, if people just say, oh, well, I just really want to adopt. That's just something that I've always had in my heart I want to do. So I'm going to sign up through foster care and to do that. Sometimes adoption does happen as a result of foster care. Not that that's a bad thing. It's a wonderful, celebrated thing. But if that's the main reason for fostering, this process will bring that to the surface. We always talk about the crucifixion of ministry. And this is like a ministry, like you said, and it brings out those motivations. Well, if you're really in it to adopt, then there's a portion of it that you're looking to foster care to meet a need for yourself. Or,
good.
sometimes I hear, oh, I want a sibling for my child. I was able to have one child biologically, and then I'm not able to anymore, and I'd really like a sibling for my child. While that's not necessarily a wrong or an evil thing, I can completely understand that, and that's I think a fair and honest motivation. At the same time, if that becomes an ultimate thing, it's like any idol. It will self-destruct, and so the process will get that much more frustrating for you if all you're doing is trying to get a need met for you or your child. Again, those two things, adoption or a sibling, they're not inherently wrong, and I think that that's an honest part of the conversation, but being able to hold that captive and keep it in check in light of the real reasons for doing it is important, and being honest with it before the Lord, being honest with it with another friend or someone in the journey that say, hey, this is something that's gotten me my foot in the door, but as I'm learning, that may or may not be what God has in store for my foster care journey. It may not end in adoption. It may be a sibling, but it's not a sibling that gets along with your child.
Right.
So there's so many variables there. Another time I hear things like, oh, I have all girls and I would love to have a boy, or I have all boys and I would love to try having a girl. And then the first placement that they get, it's another boy or it's another girl. And it's like, oh, that's not what I wanted. And again, while that's not wrong to want to change and expose yourself to a different gender, keeping it loose, keeping those expectations and those hopes and dreams for what your idea of what your family should look like loosely, because God may be trying to bless you with a child in a different gender than you necessarily thought. And while that may have been what got your foot in the door, let the Lord author that part of your story, because He only writes masterpieces. And so while we think we have the idea, we have to surrender that to His ultimate story for our lives and for our family. So another thing that we come into contact with is if you're an empty nester or a widow, some of the same things is just meeting that need for your family, or satisfying a new stage of life or loneliness. And while a child is a wonderful addition to any family, if that becomes an ultimate thing, that's when we can probably notice a few hiccups along the way.
So what I'm hearing you say is foster care is not all about you. I think that's the gist here, right?
Yeah. As most things in our life that are beautiful are, you're right. It starts with it not being about us.
Yeah.
And as soon as it becomes not about us, that's when I think we see some of the greatest blessings.
Yeah.
So.
And I think if you're focused on it meeting a need for yourself, you're constantly maybe fitting a square peg into a round hole, and that's where the frustration comes in. If you just let the process happen and let God do what he's trying to do through this experience with this child or this time in the season with this child, then God may be meeting a need for you that you didn't even know you had, and so we have to be open to that and not just kind of ascribe needs for ourselves and say this has to be met
in this
but
way.
Saying, hey God, I'm going to step into this in obedience to you, and then through that I know that you're going to meet the needs of me because I'm obeying you and I'm doing this humbly for you, and letting you work through that.
Absolutely.
So I think that's good.
It reminds me of a family that that was foster parenting when I was working there. Lynn and her husband, they got married later in life, and so in their late 40s, and they just decided, okay, well, we're probably just not going to have children, and that was just something that they understood and realized from the beginning. And so they were both really into their careers, and they were both very successful, and they just loved enjoying God's creation with the free time that they had, since they didn't have a lot of the common demands placed on them because of no children in their home. A lot of their family members and friends did, and so they understood those demands. So they celebrated their the difference of them and as their family, and they went and traveled a lot, and they had a summer home that they enjoy very much. And I think at one point in the foster care process, when they started to open that door, they even had like a 45-day cruise set to Australia.
Oh, wow.
And they were just truly enjoying God's creation and celebrating the gifts that God had given them in a worshipful way. And there was nothing wrong with how they were doing that. But as family members and friends in their community and their church started to become foster parents, it got their attention. And as they started to learn more about it, they started a dialogue. Well, what if we did that? What would that look like? Can we? We're older than I would have thought to start a family. But hey, Sarah in the Bible, what was she, like 100? So
yeah,
God has
big deal. Yeah,
God has ways of breaking the mold. So they prayed about it and began to feel a sense of calling of how about we use our resources and spend them in a way that meets a need for the orphan. So as they continue to do the classes, they decide, okay, well, we'll just do respite. And respite at the time is just basically you open your home to kids on a case-by-case basis to relieve the full-time foster parent so that they can get a break. So you might take a child in for a week or 2 weeks at a time. And again, they had friends and they had family members that were fostering and those kids that they knew. So sure, let's just open up our home and let's be a break for and a support to some of our family and friends. Then over time, through the classes and learning and exploring and praying, they said, okay, well, maybe we should actually open our home to an actual placement. So they had the space, they had the time, and so they said, okay, we'll take one child, a girl who's 10. That in their mind was what fit the bill. And so, again, while there's nothing wrong with that, they were going through the process. Lynn ended up actually quitting her job and was in the process of training her replacement as they were finishing the foster care process. She doesn't have to quit her job. It's not a requirement to become a foster parent, but they just decided that that's how they wanted to do it. So as she was training her replacement, she got to know her placement, and her placement talked a lot about her neighbor who was a foster parent. And again, Lynn saw it as confirmation of God just keeps putting these stories in my way, and it was just exciting to hear about her replacement and this neighbor, whom she had never met. So then as the foster care journey was coming to, the process at least, to become licensed was coming to an end, it wasn't final yet, but Lynn got a phone call from her replacement saying, "You won't believe it, my neighbor, for whatever reason, is unable to foster the 2 children that are currently in her home. Would you take them?" And Lynn was a little shocked. Her and her husband, they talked about it, and they were like, okay, this isn't what we had in mind. We had one, not 2. But how can we say no? I've come to know these children through the stories, even if I don't know them personally, and just really felt led to pray about it. So after a week or 2 of pushing their license through and the logistics of finding the kids again and matching them up with this home, they got the phone call, "Would you take these 2 children? Oh, and by the way, their younger sibling, who's 2, is in a different foster home, and we'd really like the 3 siblings to be together.
Wow.
Would you take all 3?"
Wow.
So now the family who had an idea of first respite, then one child, a 10-year-old girl, was met with 3 children of all different genders, from ages ranging from like 8 all the way down to 2. And it's like you know what? I can't author that, but you just can't replicate God's story for you and for them. And they've enjoyed it. I mean, it's not met with some challenges, but they still go on their vacations, and now they just bring their 3 kiddos with them.
I love that. So just keeping an open mind.
Yeah.
As to what might be the best for you,
Yes.
and not ascribing the best for yourself, but being open to what this could bring for you. I love that. That's such a sweet story. I wonder, one of the challenges that I'm thinking of, and I'm sure maybe other people that would be listening, would be when you are thinking of foster care, one of the challenges could be I guess the topic of diversity, and possibly having foster care challenge you through maybe your own biases and maybe kind of challenge the things that you thought were the norm or what you grew up with. And so for anybody listening or considering foster care, what would you say would be a realistic challenge when it comes to diversity in the home and also an opportunity for that?
So that's a really important part, the role of diversity, because you're going to be met with so many different types of things that are different when you bring a member of someone else's family into your home. And so one of those that we can talk about is just the religious diversity. Some come in with some type of religious background, whether it's a grandparent or the caregiver or just exposure in some way, and then some come with absolutely nothing. And the great thing about bringing a child into your home is the government can't tell you to not practice what you believe. And so a child is getting a front row seat to your faith every single day and watching you live that out before their very eyes. And so the beautiful thing is you get to point them to Jesus, and they get to see the hands and feet of Christ in your family with no censorship. Now, if a child is old enough to express a interest in practicing their religious beliefs, like I had a child once that went to temple. She was Jewish, and she expressed interest in that. And so the foster parent did arrange a place and time for her to go, but she also brought her to youth group at her church. And so the child did both. It was great, and she got exposed to both, and the foster parent was able to celebrate and come alongside and, hey, teach me about this. Help me know why this is important to you and what you value. And, oh, wow, that's similar with what we believe, and use it as a springboard into discussing some of that.
Yeah.
So not everyone comes in with any type of prior background, but those that do, it's an opportunity to, yes, foster that if they're asking for it, but even more so live out what you believe, especially if you're a Christian.
Yeah.
So that's a neat opportunity.
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
Though it's met initially with some diversity. So
yeah, and you are modeling to them what it looks like to be open to other faiths and being open to listen to other people that may or may not agree with you. Especially when it comes to religious diversity.
Yes.
So that's such a good point.
Right. The next one too is I think the more common, just the racial diversity. Oftentimes you're not going to get a child placed in your home that reflects what your family looks like, your cultural and ethnic background. And so it's important to recognize what that is and the dynamics that are unique to you and for the child. To be placed in a home where no one looks like you, that is a constant reminder that something's different.
Yeah.
But then as the foster parent, the challenges that it brings to the surface, whether in your friend group, your family, in yourself, in the community, a lot of times those biases do surface, and racial biases. And while we'd like to think and pretend that that doesn't exist, it would be doing the child a disservice not to acknowledge some of the inequalities that come with different races and different ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah.
And I think the unique thing and the opportunity, especially as a parent, that you get to experience is if you've never felt like a minority before. Now, let's say you go to the store, you've got a couple biological children of your own, now you've got a couple foster kids, let's say there's a couple different ethnicities represented in there, and they're all calling you mom.
Yeah.
Because they do, because you are mom.
Yeah.
Even if you're not biological or adoptive mom to those kids, they're going to call you mom, unless they ask to call you something different, which is fine. But they're all going to call you mom. And so what does that look like? That's different. People are trying to figure you out, because it's like, well, this one doesn't look like you, this one doesn't look like you, this one kind of looks like you, so which ones are yours? And foster parents have gotten those questions. Are these all your children? And, it seems like a harmless question, but it's a little bit of an offensive question, and it can put you on the defense, because there's a sense of what have you done to yield so many children so close in age with different genders or races, and it can leave question marks on people's faces, and sometimes that's met with some looks, some judgmental, maybe nonverbals, and it even exposes that in ourselves or people around us, in our family and our friends. And so while we encounter that maybe in some ways for the first time, it gives us a level of empathy into what it feels like to be a minority, but it also gives us a chance to train our kids what the family of God looks like. You know, every tongue, every tribe, every nation is represented in heaven. And when our families are blended like that, there are challenges, because there's cultural differences, there's racial differences, but as you mold to each other, you represent the family of God. And one of the most beautiful families that I know, everyone's a minority. There's no majority. There's Hispanic, there's African American, there's Caucasian. There's so much celebration in that family because of so many differences, and no one feels like they're the ones that an outsider, because everyone looks different in their own unique way. And when you push through that as a family, you're not only opening up your understanding about that side of God's family, you're also teaching your kids how to have a different worldview, how to be empathetic towards those who are powerless to change their circumstances just because maybe of their culture or their race or their ethnic background.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. That encourages me too.
Does it?
It does.
Good.
It does. It encourages me to see that through the lens that you're talking about, is not being so caught up again, with the way that you're seen and your own wants and desires. But it's like, what does the kingdom of God look like? And how can I honor that and show that here on earth through foster care? That's so good.
Yeah.
Well, Rebecca, I feel like we can talk about this all day long.
I know.
Well, as we're bringing this topic to a close, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on here and sharing a bit of your heart and experience and wisdom when it comes to foster care.
Thank you.
And we hope that, you that are listening, if you are thinking of foster care, you're praying through foster care, we hope that this encourages you. So we want to thank you so much for coming on here and joining us for the City Rev Live podcast. We will see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on City Rev Life. You can subscribe to this podcast, rate and review wherever you're listening to this. And we love it when you share it with your friends on social media. For more videos and content, go ahead and check us out at cityrev.org/podcast or download our City Rev Church app. Have a great day.